On this short video, I want to say a few words about the nation of Edom, that whose ancestor we read about in this weekly reading, Parshat Toldot, the son of Yitzchak, Esau, became known also as Edom, from the red. He apparently had red hair, maybe his skin was also somewhat turning towards redness, and especially his great desire for everything red. Even when he was given food that is red, he didn't say what food it is. He rather said, Edom azeh, this very red food. And from this, the Torah says he became known as Edom. By the way, the Torah doesn't say here in particular whether it's some negative word or not. Just that's how he became known, Edom. And of course, Edomites, the Edomians, was a nation that lived near the land of Israel. It was in what's today's Jordan, but the kingdom of Jordan includes a lot of different territories. Some territories are where some of the Jewish tribes lived, in certain areas near the Dead Sea and north of it, and all the way to the north. That's the three tribes, or rather 2.5 tribes, that got those territories, the Torah describes, from Sihon and Og, the kings of Amorites. And then the large territories towards the east was ancient Ammon, and somewhat west from Ammon was Moab, and further down south was Edom. So Edom was a territory all the way to the south of today's kingdom of Jordan, down from the Red Sea, from the Dead Sea, all the way maybe to the Red Sea, possibly. We don't know, of course, the exact boundaries, but it was a part of today's Jordan that is the most southern, maybe southwestern part, I guess. So what's interesting and what I want to describe is how a lot of times we get accustomed to a certain symbolic meaning of a particular nation, and we often associate the symbolic meaning with the actual meaning, and it's not always the same thing historically. And of course, those who learn the commentaries of the Torah and learn the Torah deeply, they will not make this type of mistake. But a lot of times, a lot of people, they might not even realize the difference between the symbolic meaning and the actual meaning. What do I mean by this? So ask a relatively young person who was learning the Torah, and an Orthodox Jew, I'm talking about people who usually spend time learning the Torah from a relatively early age, and ask them, what is Edom? Most likely they'll somehow associate it with the Western world in general. Don't be surprised, that's how it is. Most Orthodox Jews almost intuitively say, okay, the Western world, the Christian world, the European world, that's Edom. The truth is that, of course, our sages associated the Roman Empire with Edom. But it's not physically Edom. Roman Empire definitely doesn't come from Edom. Like I said, Edom was a relatively small nation that was next to the Dead Sea. But just like we say Greeks oppressed us, that brought the Hanuka miracle, right? When we were able to win over the Greeks. It wasn't physically the Greeks. It was Greek culture, and they associated with the Greeks. From the time Alexander the Great, Alexander from Macedon, conquered Persia and huge territories, basically those entire territories became known as Greeks for us. Even though physically the nationalities didn't change, of course. The Syrian Greeks were the ones who fought during Hanukkah. The Ptolemies, the kingdom in Egypt at that time, the Greek, again, it was all culturally, it was Greek, definitely. And a lot of times the original ancestors of the kings in these dynasties, since it started after the death of Alexander the Great, his empire was broken down into pieces, and the two main pieces of that empire that had to, for us, the two main ones that we had to deal with, were not the Greeks who lived in Greece, Those were far away. But rather it was the Syrian Greeks and the Egyptian Greeks, the Ptolemies and the Antiochuses, Seleucid Empire. So the north was the descendants of or those who ruled in the dynasty that was from one leader that came from one of the generals that came from the times of Alexander and his dynasty. That was in the north, Syrian Greeks, and in the south was the Ptolemies, which was the Egyptian Greeks. So culturally they were Greek, and by us they're associated with Greeks. So we just say the Greeks were the ones who oppressed us, and that's when we rebelled, and that was the Hanuka miracle. But it actually has nothing to do with Greece itself and the original Greeks as nationality. There was very little contact between Jews and actual Greeks. So the same way, when we say that Romans are Edom, there is definitely an association in the words of our sages. It may have had to do just on practical terms, because the king that was put over us by the Romans was from Edomites. So his power rested on Edom. That was Herod the Great in English. He wasn't really great. He was a terrible monster. It's not just the Christians that hate him, but by us he also did not come and he did not become historically known as a great person. On the contrary, he was killing sages. He was a terrible monster. But great, I guess, in this context, the way the non-Jews assigned him the term great is because he was a great builder, maybe, or a strong king. But that's not what makes it great in terms of the Jewish view. So at any rate, he was an Edomite. He was definitely from Edom. But there were also a lot of Edomites who joined the Jewish people and converted to Judaism. We know this for a fact from our sources, and that's why Ibn Ezra specifically mentions that in the times of destruction of the Second Temple, some of the Edomites were actually fighting on our side against the Romans. So there were different Edomites, but the ones that became remembered, I guess, through the fact that they ruled over us from the power of Edom, of Rome. Sorry, so Rome became known as Edom. So that's why, like I said, if you ask a simple person who just heard this kind of an idea, they all associate Edom with Rome and with Western Empire in general, Western civilization in general, European civilization in general, the same exact way as they'll associate with Greeks the people who fought us during Hanukkah, who were really Syrians by nationality. At least most of the people in the army definitely were Syrians, not Greeks. So why am I saying all this? Well, with regards to Esau, in our Parsha, of course, there are a lot of questions why Yitzchak, the righteous forefather Yitzchak, wanted to bless Esau, not Yacov. And I discussed this many times in on different lectures. It's not a simple answer, not necessarily one answer to all of this, but there are mystical answers given. But at least we know for sure that Yitzchak had certain plans for Esau. He was wrong in this case, and Hashem wanted actually whatever happened for a reason. And in this case, our foremother Rivka understood better than Yitzchak did that Esau shouldn't be giving this blessing. But at least the hope was that something good will come out from Esau too. Esau would be a great success in physical world. And that's why our sages say that specifically the nations that associate with Edom, those that have the spiritual root of Edom, it's definitely true that just like the spiritual root of Greeks had to do with Hanukkah, the spiritual root of Western civilization has to do with Edom. And they have a great potential for the physical achievements, scientific achievements. There's no question that this is the greatest civilization in terms of the physical achievements that ever existed, right? The Western civilization. But the spiritual part has to come from us. And when the non-Jews take the general values, I mean, in America, I like to call it Judeo-Christian values, whatever. I'm not sure I necessarily about this term, but the idea is that the biblical values of spirituality have to be included. Otherwise, just a very smart civilization. Germans were extremely smart during Nazis too. They had some of the best weapons. Maybe they could have even invented the atomic bomb first. That would be a disaster if they would have the atomic bomb before the Americans. But the thing is that just having a very great scientific achievement is not enough. So together, Esau and Yacov could have accomplished great things. Unfortunately, Esau didn't choose the right path, but at least the potential is there. And I think in today's day and age, we do see a lot of times that the potential is fulfilled in many cases. And I really hope that our world will be a world where there's both comfortable living, which is can be achieved by scientific advances, and at the same time spirituality, which is the ingredient that comes from the Torah. So this is what we want from the Western civilization, and this is what we hope for. And Bizrat Hashem, may we see the fulfillment of all this.